Just got done with a Dan Hurley media availability. Liam McNeely is a game time decision. Ahmad Noel out. Hassan Diarra limited. Let's talk about all of it, including the question I asked Dan in preview Marquette. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just wanted to come up to say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all of your support, and we're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball, the hoops capital of the world, and we're thrilled to bring you that coverage because you deserve it. To show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay. This game, this media availability felt like a game. I was fired up because Dan gave off kind of like a muted confidence with this team. And this is just a sense, like someone could infer something differently. You know, Dave Borges was there. We had Evan Rodriguez of Store Central, Joe Aruda of the Hartford Current. So they all could disagree with me. But I just get a sense that Dan felt good about practice. No one specifically asked him how Liam practiced. They just asked him how he did. Or if he was able to, and he did. He said he had a almost full practice, and then after that was kind of cautiously optimistic. Then he said, "Well, he also said he looked healthy to me." So that to me, that's coach speak for. Unless this kid wakes up tomorrow and has like swelling and is like feeling like, you know what, he's going to play. That's what I took from it. Could I be wrong? Sure. Let's bring in Dan Meehan, who's with us all the time and from Exit 68 and my co-host on at least Tuesdays and Thursdays. Dan, how are you? The media availability was cool. You could just feel like he's ready to play this Marquette game. I thought it was an interesting point. I don't know if anyone's tweeted it out about how they asked about the road environment, and I think this is definitely taking shots at Xavier and eventually Creighton, because he said, yeah, when you go to Marquette, he's like, it's an intense environment. He's like, but they're classy people. So
can read through the tea leaves there.
He's always got to dig dirt, turn the knife a little bit, which I thought was funny. What my question to him is, and I think I brought this up to you. I think I brought it up also to Little Red, which is this team truly reminds me of like a boxer who needs to get punched a few times to kind of like, I use Rocky, but I wasn't going to do that in the, although he probably would appreciate it, but I just use boxing as a term because I don't know if anyone's I've never boxed like in a competitive standpoint, but I've sparred, and sometimes you get popped, you just get pissed off. And like, that just kind of gives you that kind of extra energy to be like, all right, I don't want to get hit again. And this team just seems to need to take a few punches for them to kind of turn it on. And I thought what he said was telling. He said, part of this is he said it was a blind spot in roster construction, that they didn't bring in a guy who was an a-hole. He actually did say a-hole. He didn't say the full expletive. So he was trying to be cordial. So I think that's a really interesting like snippet that he gave us, because typically, coaches are pretty, close to the vest with how they put together their rosters, but he did say that, like, and he's right, because last year he said he had Cam Spencer. They had other guys like Andre Jackson the year before, Donovan Clingan, that held people accountable. And he said he just doesn't have a guy that can go into an opposing arena and just want all the smoke. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, like a Cam Spencer that tells the parents of the Alabama team, game's over, go home, something like that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think that Dan we've got enough of a case study of a season now. There's enough games behind us where he knows who every guy is. He knows what every guy isn't. And if you're not going to be that a-hole, like you said, like a Cam Spencer, or be a team leader vocally, a dog on the court, a player coach is, you know, what he called the last couple teams. Like they didn't need to be coached as much, like on the court wise. Like you said, Donovan Clingan was accountable on the court. Cam Spencer, 23-year-old grown man, like seen a lot of college basketball. Andre Jackson, like a pillar of the UConn program, a bridge to that 23-24 team that just led by example on the court and just didn't need to be coached up as much. The guys on this team, the small sophomore class, we've had great, strides that some of these guys have made, the solo balls. You're starting to get more contributions from Jalen Stewart, but those guys are more so kind of like they've progressed on the court, but they're not going to be as vocal leaders. Caravan has tried to become that, and he is. Like, he's a coach on the court, but they might be missing that dog, that a-hole, quote unquote, that Hurley said. Like, you're starting to see some more on court just ability and strides from Aiden Mahaney, but it seems
who he mentioned
Hurley, the way that Hurley is speaking specifically in these media availabilities the last 2-3 weeks, he's not calling guys out by name, but he's talking about them specifically, and he knows who this team is now. He knows who it isn't, and he's just not going to mince words anymore going forward. So if you're not going to be that dog, if you're not a certain, personality on the court, that's fine, but you better make up for it with effort.
Yeah, no, and to your point, he did say, he brought up Aiden. He's like, I like the way Aiden's playing lately. He said, but he also, to quote him in the thread I did, it was, it's hard to, because the end of my question was, how do you do that with a team at this point in the season for them to not have to feel that kind of like pain to then start doing that furious comeback like they did against Providence, they did against DePaul. And he said, that's when he went to roster construction. He talked about how Aiden's playing better, but he also said it's not an easy thing to do. It's hard to change someone's personality if they're that a little timid. And then I asked him a follow-up because I was one of the last people to ask him questions. I said, is Solo turning into that guy a little bit? Do you see that? And he said, yeah. Like, he actually went, yeah, he's coming off a better defensive performance, a couple of big blocks where he used that 40-inch vertical. He said he had made some huge shots and showed that fire, and we need that. And then he said Liam brings that too. He's like, so he kind of empowered this whole group. He said, I'm not trying to put too much on this kid because he's a freshman, but he said if he doesn't return soon, you're removing someone like Liam has been catastrophic. Don't use the word catastrophic from both a basketball and a locker room perspective. Because, and I so agree with him on that, because Liam was starting to turn into we talked about this. He found his Cam Spencer in Liam. And when he lost that, they lost this kind of identity that UConn basketball has had for the entire time that Dan Hurley's been a coach. Forget about the championship years. You can go back to Tyrese Martin and others, the Wrench, like guys who kind of embody what Dan Hurley's about. So that to me was the most telling part of that media availability.
And they've had such good luck the last few years with injuries. Like nobody got hurt. Donovan Clingan, slowed down in the beginning of last year, and Steph, to start the season. But once they got fully healthy, that team just hit their stride and they never looked back. The year prior, you had guys that were hurt. Clingan was kind of, even his freshman season was not hampered, but he was always on a pitch count, like for the entirety of his UConn career. And they've just been super lucky in that regard. This year, arguably their best player in Liam McNeely. If he wasn't the beginning of the season, he certainly started to figure things out. And since even in Maui, like when he had that outburst during the timeout in one of those overtime games where he just really is like, okay, this kid has announced himself in college basketball. Vocal leader. You saw him on the sideline during the DePaul game at the XL Center the other night, like flipping out. He saw one of the plays that DePaul was about to run before it happened. One of UConn's guys gets screened under the hoop and opens up to Paul for a corner three, and he just loses it on the sideline in street clothes. So it's like you could see that from the TV camera, like let alone what they're losing from him in practice, vocally and on the court. Every guy on this team has had to try to make up a little bit and try to be someone they maybe aren't. But if you get him back, he's a game time decision from tomorrow is what we're hearing. I personally don't think he's going to play. I think they're going to give it. Okay. We're going to give it. If he does play, great. It lets every single guy on this team to kind of revert back into who they are personnel wise, and the team will be better for it.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to have Andre Greska come on. He is one of the co-hosts of Paint Touches, which is a Marquette podcast that we want to get some insight in. I hope I said your name right, buddy. I'm just going to do a quick ad, and then we'll get you back in here coming up after the break. Attending an NFL playoff game has got to be an experience like no other. The energy, the excitement, the connection with other fans are unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It's a memory I'll never forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use Game Time Picks to grab tickets for an upcoming playoff game, and it couldn't have been any easier. I found a super deal that gave me an incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, knowing my tickets are backed by the guaranteed Game Time guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. You have on-ticket delivery, lowest price guarantee. You even had event cancellation and job loss protection. Absolute no-brainer. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms may apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's bring him in. This is going to be cool. We haven't had one of these scenarios happen before where we've had an opposing team's podcast or one of their content creators come in. He is, I believe, and if I'm wrong on this, you can correct us. I already put painttouches.com in the banner, and we're going to throw that up there. But he is the creator of that. This is also a podcast that Marquette does. Let's bring him to the stage, and he can tell us all about it. What's up, my man? How you doing?
Good. How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on last minute. We weren't even planning on doing this, but then Dan's media availability was they always run late, so I was like, let's do it around 4, and then it definitely would be working out good. So tell people where they can find your stuff, and then because you're obviously a bit you focus on Marquette, but there's other things that you do, and I just looked at your website.
Yeah, painttouches.com is where we publish most of the blog, but I just do it for fun, so I don't tend to publish a lot. Paint Touches on Twitter is primarily where you get all the good stuff if you don't mind all the Marquette. But yeah, I love the Big East, so I'm a big nerd in terms of like spreadsheets and financials, so the TV contract, all that stuff. I feel that's the stuff that I think engages most with the non-Marquette fans is some of that nerdom. So if you like stats, if you like numbers, if you don't mind driving into tax files, oh, look at that. What a great promo for Paint Touches, all right?
There you go, man.
There we go.
No, talk to us about this team. I'm going to give the Dan Hurley perspective because I just finished with him where he said he likes you guys. He picked you first. Versus where you guys were picked 4th to finish in the Big East. Joe Aruda, our buddy at the Hartford Courant, asked why he picked them 4th versus first. He said, "Listen, if all things were equal and everyone was healthy, it was a tough year to pick who would win the Big East." He's like, because he said we've been hurt, Xavier's been hurt, Creighton. He's like, where's Creighton with Pop Isaacs? So he said that, but he said he felt like with you guys bringing back potentially the best guard in the country. Having essentially his successor and Joyner as a backup that is, an elite player. Then you have positional role players like Ben Gold. He just felt like there was enough there. And then plus the culture with Shaka. He also gave you guys a nod and said, when you go into these intense environments, he's like, you expect hostility. He's like, but they're always classy. He's like, so he likes you guys. Like this, there was no like backhanded compliments. That's a backhanded compliment to Xavier and Creighton, but he's being nice to you guys. Tell us a little bit about Marquette from your perspective.
I mean, it's really funny when Shaka and Hurley have a really nice relationship where they're constantly complimenting each other and like very sincere. Because obviously there's always they're great, whatever. And then if you know the truth, like what that means. But earlier this year, Shaka was asked and just unprompted, he's like, Connecticut under Hurley and then Purdue under Painter. Those are the 2 programs that are being run best across the country. Like that's what we try to emulate. So they have this bond. I don't know if it's off the court, but at least in terms of a competition mindset where they're very kind of cognizant of what the other has done, which is, again, obviously Dan Hurley's accomplishments have been a little bit gone further than Shaka's. So it feels like it has to be something that might have been off the court. But in general, if you're talking about Marquette this year, you're talking about a team that has up to probably the last week or so been very, very heavy-handed on one player, and that's Cam Jones. Cam basically for the first 2 months of the season was playing at a National Player of the Year level, where he was doing everything. Literally, he'd come off for 2 minutes, and the team would crumble, and you'd have to put him back on. He was averaging like 35 minutes a game, and those 5 minutes where he was off, the team was like minus 55. And again, not big samples, so it's hard to extrapolate, but you couldn't take him off. I went to the Dayton game when they played here, and he got in early foul trouble, and it ballooned from there. So it was a very one-dimensional team that was kind of structured primarily around defense. And the weird thing about Marquette is, having watched St. John's, having watched Creighton to some extent, you would feel those defenses are much better in the sense that it's harder to score on them. If you look at the stats, Marquette's, I think, one of the worst 2-point percentage teams in the conference in terms of giving up a lot of easy baskets. They give up a lot.
185th in the nation.
Yeah, they give up a lot of threes, not a lot of percentage wise, but one of the markers of a good defense is not giving up a lot of threes, right? Forcing people into the mid-range or into tough twos. So when you look at them from a stats perspective, it doesn't really scare you. And I love to read fan boards, and everyone's the same. Like, they don't have an interior presence. They give up a lot of high 2-point percentage. And yet, if you look at KenPom, it's the 13th best defense in the league. And it doesn't feel that way. Even anytime you play them, I mean, Butler went on a 14-0 run, and it was just like open sieve to get to the lane. So there's going to be these weird stretches where if Marquette can't turn you over, you're going to find a lot of success, because that's the thing. Marquette is probably the best high major in terms of turning people over and doing so in a way that converts into very easy offense. So you have Chase Ross and Stevie Mitchell. Those are two kind of bulldogs on the front line and the wing in the backcourt and in the wing that create a lot of turnovers. And again, not just forcing people into bad passes, which happens, but their traps are purposefully trying for steals. And those steals go straight into the transition element and turn into a lot of buckets. So that's Marquette for you. On offense, no one really is going to scare you outside of Cam Jones, and he should scare you, with a caveat, and I'll say in a second. But on defense, any team that can't really hold on to the ball is in trouble, because they will be gambling, they will be doubling, they will be hard hedging, trapping. And then, yes, you're going to get open lanes when you beat that double, when you kind of dribble around the hedge. And then there's going to be a 4-on-3, there's going to be a 3-on-2. And that has led to a lot of easy baskets. But I think Marquette as a whole is fine, kind of trading a little bit of a higher 2-point percentage than you would normally expect out of a high defense for some of those turnover opportunities, which are the bread and butter of what Shaka has done now.
Dan, do you have some questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought that this is an interesting matchup to me because, like you said, Andre, you've got a team in Marquette who's only at about 45% from the field. Like, statistically, they don't wow you on paper.
Oh.
They know who their guys are. They've had all 5 of their starting guys have started each of the 21 games for you. But like Cam Jones shooting near 50% from the field, but only 32% from 3. You've got David Joplin, the second leading scorer, who's at 41% from the field, like not great in the college game, less than 30% from 3. So there are some opportunities for UConn. Like you said, like if UConn's turning UConn over, who is one of the teams that averages the least amount of turnovers in the country, like something's got to give there, right? Like and we've seen even a team like DePaul that brought Marquette down to the wire, a 2-point loss for DePaul, but close. So like if UConn looks at it that way and plays a similar type of game, they might go into some of the scouting stuff. I don't know whether Luke Murray or Kamani had the scout on this game for Marquette, but they probably watched a lot of film from that game. Maybe some of the other games where Marquette was played close, but this team is not bulletproof. If you look at some of these things on paper, there's some holes here that you can kind of turn to try to make this a game in a hostile away setting.
Yeah, no, definitely. From a rebounding perspective, it's going to be interesting to see how much Terrace Reed plays, because Marquette doesn't have a big, bulky front line. They are susceptible to giving up second, third, fourth possessions. I know in the past, Klingon or some bigger players, they would just feast. Obviously, even if you threw up a shot, you'd get the rebound. I mean, that's one of the weird elements that Ben Gold, so he's the primary center for Marquette. He's a stretch 5 in the sense that he does not he does not look like a big. Like he would be playing the 3 most likely on any team with real size, even though he's 6'11". But he's done really well defending some of the bigger post-up 5s. Tremendous job on Kalkbrenner. I think he held him for like 3 for 14 shooting, but has struggled against smaller defenders. So Butler really made hay. I think they ended up putting him Brooks or Telford for most of the game. And so on defense, he just didn't know where to be. And so a lot of the first half issues for Marquette against Butler in this most recent game stemmed from the fact that Ben Gold is better suited to guard a 5, despite his limitations and despite the fact that he's not necessarily big himself. So it's going to be interesting for me, I think, to see how much we see from Terrace Reed. Because I mean, if you just looked at it on paper, you'd be like, this is going to be his game. He's going to have a post-up element. He's going to have the rebounds there, and he really doesn't have to defend on the inside against Ben Gold, because Ben Gold's going to camp out on the 3-point line for the most of the game. So. Again,
something else that I thought was interesting is that, and this is something that our good buddy, analyst, college basketball analyst Ryan Hammer, who we had on the show, highlighted, and he does a cool graphic on, is adjusted tempo, where national championship teams have been. And it's not a metric that you need to look too far into. Like if you're in this range, you can't win the national championship. It's not one of those type of stats, but UConn plays slow. They're like 336th in adjusted tempo on KenPom. Marquette is 144th. Like typically, if you're right in the middle, that's kind of where you want to be historically as national championships are concerned. But Marquette plays like middle of the pack fast. They're smaller. UConn plays a slower half court type offense. Something's got to give there. That might be to Marquette's advantage. It could be to UConn's. Like you said, they might go big, try to run some of these lobs against like with Terrace Reed and Samson Johnson. Like this is an interesting matchup to me, because on paper, these teams are different.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts about digging into tempo metrics, is that Marquette has had a reputation of playing fast. Previous years, obviously, with Tyler Kolek driving the bus. It really, you could see it. I mean, you could see him pushing, you could see him probing. This year does not feel as fast in the tempo, and obviously, like you just mentioned, middle of the pack, not necessarily super fast. But if you go into KenPom, ever break it down by the possession length rather than overall tempo, Marquette's in the top 30 for offensive possessions and 8th worst. Not worth, 8th slowest, sorry, for defensive.
And UConn's probably dead last.
Yeah,
I've probably seen more shot clock violations on offense from the UConn team than I have in 2 decades since I was a fan.
And having talked, so Nevada Smith is the offensive coordinator. He's one of the assistant coaches, but he's just a guru in terms of pushing the envelope on the offensive side. And the first time I talked to him a couple of years ago, he's like, I asked him, what do you look for after a game from a defensive standpoint? He's like, well, there's not really good like all-in-one metrics from an individual standpoint. So from a team perspective, what we want to do is we want to force the shot as late as possible, because that's when you get some of these off balance, just prayers. So what they're trying to do, again, with their 3/4 court, you might see probably for about 15 to 20%, not necessarily slow down the pace, but just make them take their time. So that's a lot of what Marquette does, is basically, and you'll see a matchup zone too, where they'll start in a zone, and then with about 12 seconds left on the clock, they'll switch into man. And they do it a lot, and it doesn't really make a ton of sense at times, but again, it's just to throw off the timing a little bit. And so when you face a team like UConn that doesn't necessarily mind and is looking to bleed into the shot clock, it's always interesting to me, because it might not have the impact that it would against a team that's looking to attack right off the bat and gets.
I would say that the last few years, UConn would have been more comfortable playing against a defensive kind of ideology like that. This year is different. They have a smaller personnel. They've had some issues inbounding the ball coming out of timeouts. Like, true. I've seen more timeouts and near 5-second out of bounds calls from the ref than I have in years.
The other thing too, Dan, is like, I don't mean to cut you off, but like I think Dan Hurley has pointed this out too, is that it's not even an officials are a bad thing. It's just they're being called differently because they're not as aggressive, right? So they're not getting as much movement to the basket. So when you're trying to have this intricate offense that has all these cuts and all these sets, when you don't have the threat down low like Donovan, or you don't have the alpha that you can just get the ball to like Steph or Cam or Tristan, it's harder to just kind of throw it into Aiden or throw it into Haas, who are shorter, more slight, and they're being played like this. Like, guys are right on them. There's not as much separation. And if that will change if you get Liam McNeely back. So that's what I wanted to get to with Andre here is how much do you think the game plan? I already know because I haven't spoken to Shaka in my life of covering basketball, but I know coaches, and whether it's Dan, whether it's guys in the Big 12, SEC, whatever, he's preparing for Liam McNeely to be playing.
Yep.
And if he doesn't play, then the guys can kind of almost breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief because Hassan Diarra is banged up. You're going to have to see a whole hell of a lot of Aiden Mahaney. How will that change, plus or minus, with Aiden or without him, in your opinion, Marquette's defensive philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it on the radio show last night. He said, we're preparing for Liam to play. And so what he had mentioned too, that they do is for their scout team, they have a different color penny, depending on the player that they're supposed to be representing on how to attack the closeout. So depending on if you have someone that's a shooter, you attack hard. If it's someone that is willing to drive, you can't go with that because they're going to sidestep you and step into either a 15-footer or drop to the lane. So with Liam, he's multifaceted, right? He's going to shoot, but if you attack too hard, he can't get past you. Someone like Aiden Mahaney doesn't really scare you off the bounce. Like, you want to force him into a dribble jumper rather than off the spot up because he's a killer on a spot up shot. So that's the kind of effect that I think is difficult to prepare for, because you can say, like, yeah, don't attack hard, but when you're playing 40 miles per hour, you're covering, you've already been out of rotation, like, you're just trying to get there. You don't want to give up that open three. So I think the biggest difference to me, and I was going to ask you guys, because I've watched a lot of UConn, but not in the way that you guys do, is one of the things that impressed me the most last year was Diarra's defense on Kolek at UConn. I think that was one of the most impressive displays of off-ball energy that I've ever seen. He got beat up every single activity. Again, not even with the ball, off the ball. Every single activity had someone on him at all times, and primarily Diarra, and very, very physical, kind of very hands-on, chest on, you name it. With Diarra's offensive responsibility this year, I don't think he has, and again, a little bit of the injuries, but I don't think he has the ability to go at that level defensively. And again, when you lose someone like Liam, that might be able to cover some of that, and then you're replacing Salo, who, no offense, is not a good defender, and you're not going to expect that from him.
Don't worry, you do not have to say no offense to us.
Mahaney, again, not that level of defender. So when I look at this, I'm wondering if some of the defensive issues stem not just from missing an all generational player like clinging on defense, but being able to use someone like Diarra in a sense to take out someone with the ball.
Andre, like, dude, like, you hit the nail on the head, bro. Like, we've talked about this all the time. You didn't just lose Donovan Clingan. Have you seen what Steph Castle is doing to guards in the NBA? Like, he made Steph Curry, like, basically cry. Like, and Steph gets his shot off against everybody. So if he's doing that at that level, what is he doing to Big East guards all last year? And the fact that they didn't even need Steph to guard Tyler, like, that was how good that team was. Is like, listen, we're just going to put Haas, who's our sixth man of the year, and have him just be a gnat and just bother him all. But that was his only responsibility on that team. He was a good spot up shooter, good change of tempo guy, good, like a warrior. Dan calls him a UConn, like he's a UConn man. He's a warrior. Yeah. So if he's as banged up as he was against DePaul, if Liam doesn't play, you might as well just hang up the W right now, because I hate to say it, but because you still have to play the game, but it would need an all-time game from Mahaney, like 25 points against Gonzaga last year with St. Mary's. You would need someone like Jay Ross to not just do something defensively, but give you 12 points off the bench. Jay Stewart cannot just be a shooter and be a negative liability on defense like he was against DePaul. Like, Terrace Reed would have to be the bear that he's been said to be, 25 points and 12 rebounds. You're going to need guys to step up. And at this point, I haven't seen enough consistency where that would be the case. Dan, do you have any?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the assessment on Hassan Diarra is spot on. It's last year, this guy was not, he's a two-time national championship, make no mistake about it. He has that pedigree, he has that experience, but he came off the bench last year, under 20 minutes. You could bring him in like a closer, where he's coming off the bench with that mindset and just let him go crazy on the guy that he's defending, right? A Tyler Kolek type guy, where just the total X factor. He's the sixth man of the year in the conference this year. He's one of the top assist guys per game in the conference this year and has played incredible defensively, but he's worn down. Like, Hurley, I think in his media availability, said Hassan Diarra has not been practicing, but will give it a go. Not the best not what you want to hear going into one of the marquee matchups of the season against
He's
the
going to
best
play
team in the conference.
He-
He's going
he
to
walked
play,
that
but
back.
like he
His
is
level
not
of
100%.
activity. Yeah, I think I saw
Correct.
that the people were saying he was like not limping, but dragging himself against DePaul in a way
Yes.
that he hadn't been before.
What I think is going to actually end up happening is, I think if Haas gives it a go and he's starting to struggle, then you're going to see Aiden take over those minutes and give Haas extended stretches where you can try to play him in the role that he's supposed to play, which is like a 6-minute stretch where he's playing balls to the wall, and then rest him. That's what they were trying to do with this roster construction, where they thought Aiden was going to be kind of the point, and then maybe Amon Noel is kind of like that backup freshman point guard. He's out with the sprained ankle. So there's not even that option. And they've been using Liam 5 weeks ago before he got hurt as kind of like a point forward. I don't think you're going to see a ton of that, even if he plays this weekend, because he just hasn't done a lot. So you're getting like the, instead of the full menu, we joked around, we use the bar menu. Like, you're getting the bar menu UConn right now with this week. That's probably the second time I've used that reference. Shout out Gino Oriema for using that and about his offense in the ladies team. So, but that's, I mean, honestly, like, that's what this team's going to look like. But they can still win.
What does that leave
that's
you
the
with?
thing.
What does that leave you with at the end of the day? If Hassan Diarra is a little hampered, then you're relying on a guy like Aiden Mahaney, who has played very well the last few games. But this is a team, Marquette, that has big guards.
Yeah,
that can really body hit. You got Cam Jones, who's 6'5". Your other guard's 6'3", 6'4". Where does that leave a 6'2" Mahaney, who's smaller in stature, who's played well, dribble drives, in pick and roll recently with Samson Johnson down low, but against some of the bigger guards is where he's had issues this season. So if you've got a hampered Hassan Diarra who's 6'1", 6'2", if Aiden Mahaney doesn't play well, where are the rest of the points coming from? If this is a 75, 80-point game against Marquette, UConn's going to try to slow it down and play a half-court game and make it a lower-scoring affair, I think, and try to, like, UConn can't get out on the break against this team. That's just not their MO this season. It's not where they play well. So UConn, they've got a difficult scout ahead of them with this kind of personnel in Marquette, a super active coach on the sidelines in Shaka Smart. I went to the Big East Championship last year. I have never seen a guy so psychotic. Like, Shaka Smart's at half court, almost 8 feet onto the court. Like, I love Shaka. As an opposing fan, I was getting annoyed. Like, and I'm not even on the court. So they've got this is a tough task.
Yeah. And one last thing too. I know I've read a lot about UConn's inability to defend the three through no fault of their own, a lot of like bad luck. And I do buy into a lot of it. I think Will Warren had an amazing article about some of the off the dribble stuff from synergy perspective. Like, you're expected to give up this and they're giving up that. Marquette comes in with its two best shooters, David Joplin and Cam Jones, shooting a combined 25% from three in Big East play. So if you guys would give them a little bit of confidence, I think that
we
would.
Will. Andre, here's what
say. We need something.
Here's the thread. Here's the thread this year. Whenever a team shoots poorly from three, they find their range against us, and they typically do so in. Not even in like an offensive set. A lot of it is playmaking, which you guys play plenty of. So even if it doesn't come in the flow of your offense, you're probably going to have your best 3-point shooting game of the year. Is my prediction for you.
And the opposite end, Marquette is unsustainably allowing low percentage, so that's going to change at some point. Hopefully, it's not a solid ball 8 for 11 performance that we have been talking about for years, but it is coming. Regression for Marquette, aggression for UConn, depending on how you want to look at it. That's coming. We're just going to hopefully it waits a few more days.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, thanks for jumping on. We're going to stay on for like 5 more minutes to close out the show, but feel you can jump on or you can jump off. It's up to you. I know that this was last minute for you, so appreciate you. I'm going to take a quick break and then shout out a new sports bar in Manchester, and we're going to talk about that coming up after the break.
Thanks. Bye.
Nope, just kidding. That's not it. Bye. Oh, he's gone, and our breakaway's gone here. We're live, and you know what? Who cares? like Bill O'Reilly. F it. We're gonna do it live. I'm gonna see if I can get that back. Yeah, but there's no whatever. We'll figure that out another time. I'm gonna shout out Joey Bailbon's brother Ryan's bar, and I'm gonna put a banner up. if you are in Manchester, Ryan Sports Bar and Grill, or just in Connecticut, 485 Hartford Road, Manchester, Connecticut, 0640. Check that out. I'm sure it's wonderful. I've heard great things about it. Check out the Google reviews. I saw only good ones. And I know they're big UConn fans, so you're supporting a UConn fan the same way you support someone like Dan and order shirts through Exit 68, stuff like that. Gotta keep it in the family in that respect. Would love for you guys to go check out Ryan Sports Bar and Grill. And when I'm in Connecticut, I know I will at least pop in. I'm gonna keep that up. What do you think, man? As far as the just kind of like the prediction, I think we definitely beat a dead horse with where we think the game is going to go. I think we both think this is going to be a tough one. Give me a reason why UConn will win and a reason why UConn will lose.
So, like we kind of just previewed with Andre, I think that something has to give here with this personnel on paper. Like Marquette plays a little faster. They don't shoot the three ball well, which bodes well for UConn, a team that has not defended the three ball well. So something's got to give in that regard. This UConn team reminds me one of the early 2010s teams that just every time out, you think they're going to kill a team, and they just time and time again play down to their competition. This team needs just like a good team to get up for and just like wake themselves up mentally. If Liam plays great, if he doesn't, I still think this game is close. I think UConn's going to surprise us in this one. I hated the first half of the Paul game, but I'm really not going to put too much weight into that game, to be honest with you. Convenient for me as a UConn fan to not put too much weight into playing down to the worst team in the Big East. But I just think this team needs a wake up call every night when they come onto the floor. You're away.
What I said.
You don't have to worry about, UConn's fans not getting up for a game in this one. Like, the opposing crowd is going to do that for you mentally. You're playing against a guy in Shaka Smart that's always going to have his team ready, active on the sidelines. Like, that as a player on the court triggers you when you look across the court and seeing a guy like similar to Dan Hurley who's super active and
playing defense over there.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think that stuff just like subconsciously locks you in. Like, you don't have to wake up in the morning and get yourself going. So I think this is going to be a close one. I just wanted to go over kind of like resume stuff. UConn, our buddy Evan Mia just introduced a really cool new stat. It kind of rivals the NCAA net rankings. It's called resume quality, and it just kind of makes understanding wins and losses just a little bit easier. He puts a weight into every team's wins and losses, and it kind of just adds it together to come up with a resume ranking for every team. He's got UConn currently 41st overall in that regard. He labels every team and gives them kind of a range of where they might be seeding wise based on their current resume. So he's got UConn 41st and quote unquote just in the field. He doesn't even give them a projection on where they might be ranked 8, 9, 10. So UConn, they're not quite a bubble team yet, but if they win this game, they can probably kind of consider themselves in the tournament. Seeding still has to shake out, but if they lose this one, if they drop one to St. John's, lose at Marquette, they're a bubble team or worse. And something that Marquette's, they're 18-3. They're currently in first place in the Big East. This team puts up 80 points a game. They defend well. They're a top 60 team in the nation in points per game. Net ranking right now, they're 15th, but Evan Mia has them currently ranked 4th in their resume rank. They might be better than we think, but something's got to give. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, before we go, I will say I love Evan Miyakawa. I hope he does come back on the show and talk to us about that. Send him a message. We'll see what time we can figure that out. My thing is, because I sent this to you in a screenshot, the one thing that I don't love about metrics, we can all talk about tempo metrics and everything that comes with it. Sometimes, like when we do like lineup specific stuff, I just don't think that people are thinking that some of Evan's top lineups are like the top teams in the country. So some of them are the Auburns, the Dukes, some of those guys. But sometimes you have to take the metrics as a point of reference, watch the game. That should inform you about how good a team is. Also, you should also look at not just the box score. The box score doesn't tell you whether someone played well. Alex Gierman was plus 11 in the plus minus, had 8 assists and 6 rebounds, had a poor shooting night. that if you want to focus on his poor shooting night and missing floaters, cool. That's you being negative. I want to focus on the fact that he kept them in the game by getting a ton of rebounds, by getting 8 assists in the game, and was plus 11. Same with Jay Ross. No points, 3 rebounds, like 2 assists, plus 12. His defense was big in that game. So this team is turning a corner in terms of the contributions that people make. Aiden Mahaney was like plus 8 in the plus minus with 10 points, and then also had like 4 assists. So I think if we can get contributions and you wake up tomorrow morning and you hear Liam McNeely is playing, this team is going to be fired up to welcome back their brother in arms and someone that is the guy who can walk into Pfizer Forum and say, give me all the smoke. So that's what I'm looking for. I will be disappointed if Liam doesn't play, not from a perspective that he should or, but because of that he's not going to give that lift to a team that needs it because Haas is injured, because Alex has been hampered by, the injuries and being essentially attacked as the only number one option. I think it gives a lot of relief to the rest of the team. It lets Solo be Solo. It lets Aiden be Aiden, all of that. All right, we're going to close out the show. Remember, check out Ryan's Sports Bar and Grill, 485 Hartford Road, Manchester, Connecticut, 06040. Hey, I loved it. I loved going live here impromptu on a Friday. Dan, thanks for jumping on. Our thanks to Paint Touches and Andre for jumping on as well and giving us the Marquette perspective. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. Keep those toughness meters rising. And as always, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.